Well, hello again, my friends, and welcome once more to the Invisible College. Now, this is going to be an impromptu lecture. I've just been having a bath, and I often get my best ideas when I'm in the bath. And I had the sudden feeling that I need to talk to you about some very important subjects that has sort of been approached obliquely in my earlier lectures. But we're now coming to a very, very critical time in this world. And I don't want you to be left behind, when the rest of us get on that good ship, New Jerusalem, and wave goodbye. And you're left here with earthquakes and eruptions and devils and all the rest of that horrible nonsense that you read about in the book of Revelation. So if you aren't scared now, you soon will be. And it's time for you to grow up and smell the coffee, as they say. And today I'm going to talk to you a bit about who are you? Who are you really? Because you haven't been really told that, have you? And I'm going to shoot a few sacred cows in the process. We're going to shoot down some of the shibboleths, the sacred cows of science, that is fed to you as the truth, but in all probability and most of the time is only a part of the truth. And that's a very different thing. Because it's partly true, it can deceive you much more than if you're told an outright lie. But because it's only partly true, it's also partly false. And we need to look deeper if we want to find the truth about who are you. Now, I've been wondering where to start this, and I think I'm going to start it with Gurdjieff. Now, I've talked about Gurdjieff before. I'm not an indoctrinated Gurdjieff Uspensky scholar who went to one of their subsequent schools. Gurdjieff was dead before I was born. Or no, Uspensky was. Gurdjieff about a year later. So I didn't actually meet either of them. I did meet J.G. Bennett, who was very prominent. He met them in 1920, I believe, in Constantinople, and he was with Gurdjieff very much in his last year. He'd been a student of Uspensky before that. So I met him. I had a chance to touch, as it were, the living tradition. So I have touched it, but I haven't actually been a member of it. But I have studied the books that they left behind them. I've read all of Bennett's books. I've read all of Uspensky's books. I've read Gurdjieff's books, all three of them, including Beelzebub's Tales to his Grandson, which is a very strange, ironic, comedic book on one level, but also full of a lot of very deep teachings on another. And I want to point out one of Gurdjieff's favourite sayings, the way he dismissed modern scholarship was to talk about learned beings of new formation. What did he mean by that? Well, the learned beings of new formation are what we would term scientists, really, that cook up theories of their own to explain this, that, and the other, and present that as fact. And very soon people forget what's theory and what is fact. They confuse the theories to explain different observations with actual proven fact. Theories are not proven. The real science is always ready to be turned over. But unfortunately, that doesn't happen. What one professor says becomes a dogma for the next generation. And pretty soon it ossifies. The whole thing is like, it starts off as cement put into a mold, and it hardens, turns into concrete. And then you find that you can't even criticize or approach the fundamentals of a particular science to challenge it, because this is now a shibboleth. This is now a part of their religion, part of their belief system. And if you are allowed to overturn that thing, it would mean that they're exposed like the emperor with no clothes. And that's particularly true of cosmology, by the way. That's why the electric universe has had so little traction. The mainstream won't allow it. The journals are controlled by the mainstream. So if you write a paper discussing something to do with the electric universe, or the plasma universe, some people call it, and you're emphasizing the importance of the electric force as opposed to gravity, you won't get your paper published. It'll be struck out. No, this is nonsense. So that's the world we live in. But if you have learned beings of new formation, that suggests that there are also learned beings of old formation. And what is a learned being of old formation if they're not like a scientist? Now, we're going to get into a little bit deeper philosophy here. So brace yourself. We've got to think back to who are you? Now, one of the things that you will have come across, I'm sure, is this whole idea of DNA. The DNA molecule, this magical molecule in every cell that contains the genetic code of every species, has its own DNA. We have a DNA. Each of us have an individual one, actually. We don't have the same as each other, which is how there is a genetic fingerprint that pathologists and people can use to trace who did what in a murder case. You can also use it to find your long-lost relatives in Australia or America or whatever, who share enough of your DNA that it's clear that they must be cousins. So there is that level to DNA. But what is DNA? Well, I'm a former computer programmer, among other things, and I can tell you that DNA is actually a data file. That's what you could call it. It contains data, and that's fine. You know, computers use data. They manipulate data. They work on process of algorithms that seek to find data and to analyze it and to use it. But a data file is not the same thing as a computer program. A data file will do nothing on its own. It will just sit there on a computer disk, waiting to be accessed, to be interrogated by a program that will pick out just the right piece of data required to do a process. Now, a computer program, if you're not a computer programmer, is really a collection of routines. Any program, you take it apart, you'll find there are a series of routines. And if it's well written, it's structured so that you have routines for, example, data input. You'll have data input routines, which will be waiting for data to be typed in and doing something with that data. I type on my computer keypad and it puts it up on my screen. So I can read it and I can edit it and I can do things with it. That's called word processing. Or it can be data that you put into, you have some other program running. Your word processor is a program. You have some other program running that you press a particular key and it can launch an atomic weapon. That's as simple as that. There are routines in programs and they do things. They deal with data and they store data, they manipulate data, whether it's scientific data or whether it's business data or whether it's Facebook or whatever. That's what they do. So they have a series of routines to do different things. Now, the DNA is not a program. It's a data file. And that presupposes, where is the program? What is the program? And I'm going to start talking now in more philosophical terms. So come with me. I'm going to take you on a little journey here. And you'll start to see things a little bit different. The program, you could say, is your soul. Now that sounds daft, doesn't it? saying your program is your soul. We don't have a soul, you might be thinking. What do you mean, Adrian, by talking about a soul? That's a stupid medieval concept that Darwin proved that doesn't exist. Well, he didn't prove anything, actually. All he did is prove that there are species. He didn't show how they transform from one to another, except in very minute cases like the tits on birds, on the Galapagos Islands and the different beak shapes. Big deal, things do adapt, but that's not the same thing as creating a new species. And there are all sorts of gaps in the evolutionary record, and I've written about this or lectured on it in other programs you can find on my YouTube channel. So, what is your soul and where does it reside? Now, I want to put something to you. You are probably watching this on either a laptop or maybe a mobile phone, or you might be on a desktop, or you might be on a television set. Now, 9 times out of 10, I'm betting that you're using Wi-Fi. That somewhere down the line there is a Wi-Fi connection, whether it's your phone contacting mobile phone mast and connecting back that way to a data storage area, perhaps in Iceland or somewhere, or it's your Wi-Fi in your home, or it's your TV connection, your Roku stick or whatever. They're all connecting through Wi-Fi. And you don't see the waves and the connections of the Wi-Fi. It's invisible to you. You know it's there, you know it's happening, otherwise you wouldn't be seeing me talking here now. But you don't know, you can't see it floating through the air. It's invisible. Now I put it to you that your soul is something that uses the equivalent of Wi-Fi. That's strange things to say, isn't it? But it is what holds the programs, not just of your present life, but of many past lives, in all probability. And it also has details about what you are aiming to achieve in this life. And people come into this world partly to work off bad karma and all of that, but they also come here with something they're going to work on with themselves. And by themselves, I mean their soul. They're going to try to develop something that's not yet developed in themselves. So you have this thing, this invisible thing called a soul, which is communicating to your body and working with your body to access the DNA which contains the data files for this body. And you've inherited those data files from your parents, who inherited it from their parents and going back up the stream. And there are things in your data file which perhaps are not to the best. There are habits and things like that you inherit. People inherit all sorts of stuff from their parents besides their colour eyes and their colour hair and their race and all that kind of thing. They also inherit certain habits. And you have to find ways of sorting these out in your lifetime. That's part of the process. And I divide the person into 3 parts. You have a snake, which you can think of as being your spinal cord, which operates things automatically. It deals in automatic energy, actually. And so when you're driving a car, you're talking to your friend and you're changing gear, you don't have to think about it. Your body knows what to do. You're riding a bicycle, you don't have to think, oh, I've got to be careful. Your body knows what to do once you've learned how to ride a bicycle. You never forget it. And it's the same with most things in our lives. A large part of ourselves is automatic. And it's also instinctive. A cup falls and you reach out and you catch it. And you don't know, how did I catch that? But I did. And you didn't think about it. It happened in an instant. The hand went out and caught it. That's because there's this instinctive part of yourself that worked very, very fast, much faster than your mind can move. And that is what people train when they're learning martial arts, by the way. They learn to stand back and let their instinctive center take over. They teach themselves certain moves and certain responses to particular attacks, you might say. And then they learn to get out of the way and let their instinctive center deal with it. And you have the super fast things you see in some of these martial art films. That's your instinctive center. But you also have what you might call your mammalian self. And your mammalian self, I like to think of it as being your horse. Your horse is what your soul rides on. And most of what you think is you is your horse. And your horse is all the time looking for fun. It's looking for the opposite sex that they can have sex with. It's looking to have a good time with its mates drinking. It also is what falls in love or what it takes to be love, which is attraction. And it's like a horse. It has to eat, it has to sleep, it has to do all these things. And that is your physical body and your physical body's self. And that works on what's called sensitive energy in Bennett's system. And part of self-development is learning how to train your horse. And I've talked about this in other lectures. An untrained horse is not going to get you very far. You know, you'll be wanting to ride to London and it wants to go and chew the cud somewhere. It wants to go and chew grass. And you're trying, jump, jump. And, I'm going to eat the grass. So you have to train yourself, and that's called learning self-discipline. And you've already done this to a large extent. That's what school is for, particularly. It's not to allow you to explore the whatever you feel like doing. Do you feel like playing with plasticine today, children? Well, here's a bucket of plasticine. Play with that and you'll learn. No, you're supposed to learn things like your ABCs when you're at school and your 3 R's, you know, reading, writing and arithmetic. If you don't learn those, how are you going to function in society? You're not, are you? You're going to be handicapped all your life. So there are things you need to learn. And as you progress into higher levels of school, you go to secondary school, you learn other things. You learn more about geography, about history, about mathematics, about art, or, you know, all sorts of things. And then you maybe go further. You go into doing A-levels and you take certain subjects at a much deeper level. You go into those. And then you maybe progress to what's called tertiary education, which is university. And a good university ought to be teaching you something very different from what they teach today. They ought to be helping you to learn how to use your mind, learn how to approach knowledge and to think for yourself. But they don't. These days they want to indoctrinate you into woke. And that's a disaster. It's an absolute disaster because it won't help you. It won't help you get a job. It won't help you to progress to becoming a meaningful, useful adult. So, but what else? That's not what I really want to talk about today. That's all ancillary, training the horse. What about the soul? Well, the soul is the spiritual part of yourself, but what does that mean? The soul is what's cut off here. It's cut off from God, you could say. For the most part. And this is where something that I call the Logos tradition, the Logos doctrine, comes into play. And this is, when Jesus was teaching his disciples, I would say that John was the most developed of them. He lived to a very old age. He was the one who was Jesus' favourite. And it's not for nothing that he starts his gospel with the Logos doctrine. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. etc. And the Word was life. Life was the light of men. What does that Logos doctrine really mean? It means that God, now get away from thoughts about God the Father with a long beard and sitting on his throne, go and destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. Get that out of your mind and think of this as being the ultimate intelligence in the universe. That this universe is not just a collection of gas clouds and rocks and exploding hydrogen bombs with a few planets going around and, but by some extraordinary chance, this particular planet we call Earth, life evolved. It came from nowhere. We don't know how it came. It evolved and there we are, intelligent robots. Get away from that. That's not the truth. That's the teachings of learned people of new formation. And it won't get you anywhere. There is a logos, there is the word, and the Greek word logos also means law. And it means that God sets up the laws. This intelligent being who's created everything sets up the laws of creation and destruction, the laws of everything. But it doesn't come at you in full force. I'm God now, I'm speaking to you, Adrian. It doesn't come like that. It goes through gradations. And the gradations we can call cosmoses. So, for example, in my body, you could say my body has its total life, but there was a special life to my kidney. My kidney is a subdivision of my body, and within that kidney, there are individual tubules, and within those tubules, there are individual cells. So there's a gradation. And if that kidney as a whole is not functioning properly, I'm going to be ill, aren't I? And the same with my heart, with the lungs and with the stomach, everything, So there are gradations of different organs doing different things and having different processes and different requirements. You can see that, very clear. Well, it's the same in the universe. There are gradations. There is an invisible God, everything. You could say he's incarnated in the entire universe. But then there are also galaxies and galactic clusters. There are star systems with planets, and then there are individual planets, and they might have a moon. So there are these gradations, and the Logos comes down the stream and works on different levels. Now, as a soul, you should be connected directly to the Logos stream. But you're not, because of what's termed in the Bible the fall of man, Eve eating the apple, or Adam eating the apple. And the reason for that, what that symbolizes, is coming to earth. The earth itself is an apple on the tree of life. And eating the apple implies incarnation into this world, cutting off the Wi-Fi of the Logos stream, and therefore losing your energetic connection. Some Wi-Fi units you can actually charge a computer using Wi-Fi. Did you know that? You don't have to plug it into a socket in the wall these days. You can actually charge it from the Wi-Fi. And you should be like that, but you're not. Instead, you have to have a horse, and a horse can eat the food of nature. And because it can eat the food of nature, and it has systems within it for processing that food, then it can generate energy. And from that energy, your mind can work. And so you can think, and you can do things. But where does that lead us? Well, if you want to really find yourself, who you are, you need to find your way back to connection with God, with the Logos stream. And how are you going to do that? Well, first of all, you've got to want it. If you don't want it, if you're going to go around in your life saying, well, there's no God, it's nonsense. You live today, die tomorrow, then you're an urn full of ashes, they chuck it away and that's it, you're gone. Well, if you live like that, if you think that that's the truth, then you're not going to find God, are you? Because one thing about God is given you free will. That's why you've come here. One of the reasons why you come here, why you severed that connection, is so that you have a sense of free will, because you have a machine, this body, that can eat the food and generate the energies that you need for you to be up to a level creative and up to a level to think and be intelligent and up to a level try things out in the 3D world. And that's your free will. You've been given that. And as long as you're going to go around saying, well, there's no God, I'm the God of my universe, man is the measure of all things, the most intelligent thing in the entire universe, you're not going to make connection with God, are you? What is being looked for is for you to want it. And the first thing you have to do is to be humble. You've got to be humble enough to say, well, actually, I'm not that great, am I? I do things sometimes that I'm quite ashamed of, and there's things in my past I'd rather leave locked away in the cupboard. I'd rather people didn't know about that. Yeah, you have got those things, haven't you? I'm sure you have. There are things you said and done that you wish you hadn't now, certainly if you're older. Well, if you want to reconnect, you've got to admit to those things. You've got to come with a humble heart and say, I'm sorry, I did wrong there. I really would like to be reconnected. I would like to live the right way for my soul, to do right by it. I don't want to be decadent. I don't want to be live today and die tomorrow and that's it, dust to dust. I want to have eternal life. I want to reconnect to the intelligence of the entire universe. And if you do that, that's the first step. You've got to want it. And you've got to ask for it. Now, I'll take you back in my own journey. I had certain experiences when I was young, but I went to Israel, much in the news these days, in 1972 it was. And I went to work on a kibbutz, and this kibbutz was in the far north of Israel. It actually is in the danger zone now for Hezbollah and their rockets and what have you. But that's not what I want to talk about here. I went there because I wanted to know the truth about Christianity. I thought if I go to Israel, to the Holy Land, see the places where Jesus was, try to get the feel of the place, I might find something that can tell me a bit more about what this religion is really all about, because I didn't like the Roman Catholicism I was brought up in. To me, it was far too ritualistic. I didn't like all these men in fancy dress. I didn't like the pride that I saw manifested by that fancy dress. And I couldn't see the connection between all that pomp and splendour and the humble carpenter's son who was teaching the multitude and performing miracles. I never saw any miracles happening in the church. All I saw was a load of fat priests. I went to a Catholic boarding school. I saw them in native habitat. I didn't like them. I didn't trust them. So I realised that if I was not going to trust that route, I needed to find another route. And I thought, if I go back there, I'm going to ask the questions. And I went back there, and I remember I was sitting on a little sort of raised part of the Golan Heights, and I was sitting there in the lower levels of the Golan Heights. You couldn't go off the path because there were still unexploded mines and bombs and who knows what from the Six-Day War. This was a bit before the Yom Kippur War. And I sat on there, and I had a Bible with me, and I had a prayer book with me, or sayings. And I said, look here, God, look here, Jesus. If there's truth in this, I'm asking. You say, knock on the door, it will be shown to you. Well, I said, I'm knocking. I'm knocking. How loud does it have to be for you to show me the truth and show me the way? And that was the beginning of the focusing of my journey into the Western tradition, into the true Western tradition, which is not magic. It's not people putting on sheets and calling themselves Druids. It's nothing to do with that. That's all play acting as well. It's stupidity. It's a philosophical tradition which is essentially Christian. And if you are of the West and you don't follow the Christian path, then you're abandoning your own heritage. And if you abandon your own heritage, as we have very much in England today, God is going to say, right, well, they don't want me. They don't want the heritage that they've been given. Well, leave them to it. And that's when you're going to have your country taken over by others, which is happening here in England now. So this is what I wanted to get across to you. If you want to find the truth, you've got to ask for it. You've got to start being humble enough to ask and say, show me the way. Show me someone who can tell me. Show me someone who can teach me the way. Not saying it's necessarily myself. It could be anyone that has walked that path and you might come into your life. But you've got to start trying to make the effort yourself. If you don't, you'll be left at the wayside and you'll regret it. I can promise you, your soul will regret it. So that's what I wanted to say today. You know, who are you? You are a soul. What is a soul? A soul is essentially your real being that holds the computer programs, and it can access the DNA that you've got that makes your body, and it can keep you alive, and you know, using that. And your soul will probably have lived many lives, and it has the possibility of moving up the stream as well. That's what 2001: A Space Odyssey was all about. You remember at the end, it's the baby there, as incarnating, he's turning himself into a star. And that might be your destiny. It depends. But you've got to ask for it. You've got to be willing to be humble enough to say, I don't know. Please show me. Please show me the way. Please help me to reconnect to the Logos stream. And you will be shown. But if you don't ask, you won't. And if you do ask, and you will start then having the possibility of coming into contact with angels. Before that, if you don't do that, if you don't, oh, I don't care, it's all nonsense, the only angels you'll contact will be demonic. You don't want that. Really, really, you don't want that. You need to come under the umbrella of Jesus Christ, if you've got any sense, and you will have the protection then. So that's what I wanted to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope you found this interesting, and I leave it with you. Thank you very much.